or greenhushing. On our panel today, I'm joined by Roshni Bandesha, Head of ESG and Sustainability at BGF, Emma Bickerstaff, Managing Director of Holtara, and Anna Maria Spulber, Head of Software Product Development for Retransform. The panel will share how they've harnessed the power of sustainability to propel their business, empower their teams, and make a positive impact on our planet. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll go straight into our first question. And I'd like to start by thinking about your clients. Anna Maria, can you share some of the ESG challenges your clients are facing?
Sure. So I will share some challenges from a real estate angle. We all know that real estate is responsible for about 40% of global CO2 emissions. And this is a critical issue that needs addressing. Our clients have encountered the various challenges, cost challenges, environmental cost, upgrading buildings to meet energy efficient standards, investing in sustainable materials can require substantial initial outlay, governance costs, compliance and increasing regulations on transparency, ethical practices and data protection can result in higher administrative and legal expenses. CO2 challenges, retrofitting, updating older buildings with energy efficient system and materials can reduce emissions is costly and complex. The tenant collaboration, engaging tenants in energy saving practices and sustainability initiative can be challenging, but is crucial for reducing overall building emissions. There are a lot of regulatory challenges, data challenges, data collection, gathering comprehensive and accurate data on energy usage, water consumption, waste management, and social impacts across properties is complex and resource intensive. The same applies to data quality, ensuring data consistency, reliability, and timelines across diverse portfolios and systems can be challenging, affecting the ability to monitor performance and make informed decisions. Market challenges, the fluctuant market prices, the volatility in real estate prices can affect the feasibility and timing of investment in ESG initiatives. Technology adoption, the slow proliferation of advanced technologies such as AI in the real estate sector limits the ability to quickly reap the benefits of these tools for improving energy efficiency, resource management, and ESG reporting. So these are some of the challenges, the most frequent challenges that we have encountered through our portfolio of real estate clients.
The challenges seem quite vast. Roshni, does that resonate with you?
Absolutely, Lakshmi. I think it was really interesting to hear some of the points, especially around data regulation come up, as well as the veracity of the data. So for BGF, we are a purpose-led investor. We are quite wide spanning in terms of our portfolio. So we have around 300 companies. So a lot of these challenges become quite exaggerated. But the other unique point is that our businesses are SMEs and growth stage businesses. So when it comes to the need to get right data, they are even less supported in some ways in getting the right guidance around what they should be doing or shouldn't be doing. So the way that I've articulated some of these challenges and learned from our portfolio is that you almost have to work or support them through 4 stages. What should be the right strategy, which is often the most challenging piece, whether it's the environmental side or the social side or the governance side. And that's where data and regulation can become quite critical. But from the strategy, moving them onto the point of accountability, that once you know what the problems are, who within a small business is actually going to take ownership and then set the right KPIs, wherein regulation plays also quite a critical role because you need to know what you need to be working towards. And then from the accountability, really thinking about implementation, because actually a plan on paper could be very different from when you start doing it in the economic challenges that we are facing, especially as we heard on the real estate side, which again we are invested in. Everything changes so rapidly. How do you manage your costs along with ESG? And the last piece is transparency, which is where the veracity of the data becomes really critical and sometimes quite challenging to get to. Audit costs can be prohibited, but at the same time, you need to be providing a clear narrative to your key stakeholders. So those are, I think, some of the ways that challenges are playing out, especially for SME and growth stage businesses across these. And we've benefited a lot from the whole Tara support that we have received, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that.
Great, thanks, Roshni. Emma, from your perspective, is there anything else that you've heard from clients that they're challenged with?
Yeah, I think Roshan actually summed it up beautifully, and I think we see this across a lot of our investors and manager clients, and we've all sort of touched on the impact of evolving regulation, and I think that evolving regulatory framework is really difficult for many investors, especially those that span multiple regions and jurisdictions where there are different regulatory requirements, and the layering effect of those regulations is very difficult, I think, to kind of slice through and understand what's the sum total of the information that's required from underlying companies and from managers. And I think coupled with that, we're really seeing clients move from a best endeavors basis where it comes to collecting information and much more focus now on the accuracy and the quality of the data that they're collecting. And we still have a long way to go here. I think many companies are still establishing the operational processes to routinely sort of track that data and make sure that it's coming from the right source and that it's accurate and timely. We see a big demand, for example, for our data verification services, where firms are increasingly looking for an external view or a third-party opinion as to the accuracy or the validity of that information, especially when it comes to sharing that data, not only now with investors, but also regulators.
For sure. Thanks, everyone. In recent years, we've seen the spotlight shine brighter and brighter on ESG. Apex itself is working to build a high-performing, sustainable and equitable company, not just for the benefit of the industry, but for the benefit of the wider society too. And much like our own thoughts on how ESG shouldn't only be a long-term focus for scientists or politicians, we've seen our peers in the industry starting to make conscious effort to put sustainability first. Emma, I'll start with you. Can you share your thoughts on the motivation for keeping ESG at the forefront of business decisions?
Yeah, definitely. I think ESG was really initially a framework designed to monitor financial risks. So it's really occupied with how the impact of certain ESG considerations can impact the commercial performance or the valuation of an asset. And I think in recent years, and certainly as long as Holtara has been offering services to clients, we've seen an evolution of ESG into much more of an impact framework. So the discussion now is more focused, hopefully, on how a company impacts the world around them. And that awareness and responsibility, I think, is really important to make sure that every company has a level of, consciousness around the way that they conduct their business and the impact that they have on their stakeholders outside of their organization. But those impact topics are also really very commercial. I mean, we see, for example, a failure to embrace DEI that can result in attrition. It can result in increased risk around litigation. Poor energy management obviously leads to higher utility costs. So even an impact lens on ESG can have a really important commercial impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Anna Maria, obviously Emma's just mentioned that there's the commercial impact. And there's opportunities to reduce running costs by focusing on ESG, but obviously that's not the only motivation. Can you share your insights?
Sure. So from a real estate angle, one motivation has been avoiding the transitional risks. So these risks stem from the process of adjusting to a low carbon, more sustainable economy. So real estate stakeholders face these risks related to regulatory changes, technological advancements, and shifting the market preferences and norms. For example, as governments impose stricter emission regulations, property that fail to adapt could face decreased market value or increased operational costs. There are also value opportunities like enhancing the asset value. In real estate, so properties with high ESG rating often enjoy higher occupancy rates and can command higher rents, enhancing the overall asset value. There is access to green financing. Real estate companies with strong ESG practices may qualify for green bonds and loans, which often come with lower interest rates or favorable terms. Innovation leadership. By leading in sustainable practices, companies can set the industry standards, influencing market trends or positioning themselves as market leaders. Or resilience building. Investing in resilience measures against climate change not only mitigate risk, but also enhances the long-term viability and profitability of assets.
Brilliant. Thanks, Anna Maria. Roshni, finally, what do you think the motivations are?
I think it's interesting to reflect back and think that there was a time where the ESG risks were only considered from a financial perspective, as Emma was saying, right? Because if you think about what is the purpose of a business, right? It's to solve a problem for the people of planet. I can't think of a business that exists that isn't solving something for a customer base, households, other businesses. So if you think about the structure and the responsibility of the business, it obviously is beyond the shareholders. It obviously is outside of its four walls. And if you think about the broader societal impact of businesses, it is the predominant source of employment, income, use of resources. So I know that ESG has come up as a new topic, but essentially, actually, responsible businesses have always been looking at it, but we've had to bring in the focus and some of the incentives that Anna Maria was also talking about in terms of better financing if businesses are doing much more on the ESG front. And the ultimate aim is that unless we build businesses that are resilient to societal change, to climate change, we will always have an economy which is at risk of being derailed because of these pieces. And that only comes when you think about holistic roles of businesses rather than we exist for the shareholders.
Brilliant, completely agree.
And Lakshmi, maybe just one more point on that. I think what Roshni is describing there is sort of that evolution of ESG. We're also seeing now played out in regulation. So the newest regulation from the European Commission, the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, is really focused on more clearly articulating the difference between that financial and impact materiality, and really encouraging clients or companies to look at some of these ESG topics through both lenses, and then think more holistically about, what is material and what is the responsibility of that company to make sure they're aware of those, areas that could impact their business, or those areas that they could have a real impact on societal and planetary outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. We shared our first carbon footprint assessment information in our sustainability report, which was released this week. And whilst our employee base nearly doubled between 2021 and 2022 and increased our emissions, we've seen that our emissions reductions over time are broadly in line with the IPCC reduction pathway. Roshni, can you share your insights from your perspective? How do you balance business growth with managing your carbon footprint, and what's the outcome been from this piece of work?
Happy to, Lakshmi. So when we think about guiding our portfolio on this journey of your carbon management plan and your reporting, I think the predominant focus, in my view, has to be taking responsibility and knowing clearly where you are. So what is your starting point, and then how do you take it further from there? Oftentimes, businesses don't have the right support or are not being able to fully understand what does an increase actually mean. So for us, if you're an SME or a growth stage business that we are backing, you will grow in revenue, you will grow in operations, you will grow in terms of your employee base, which are all linked to your carbon emissions. However, unless you have, just like you were describing about Apex having a plan which is in line with certain standards, it's very hard to actually judge whether you are within the acceptable range or not. So what we try to have our businesses focus on is the intensity ratios, which are quite critical when you start thinking about climate emissions. And then beyond the intensity ratios, it's also critical to think about the wider impacts beyond carbon sometimes. You can just be in a carbon tunnel. It's all you look at. It's a very useful framework, but to be recognizing on the biodiversity impact, ecological impacts as well. So we're trying to bring in the use of data and getting businesses to understand that as your data gets better, as your operations become more and more robust, your emissions may go up, but it's really critical to think about the intensity of the operations and also what is happening beyond just the carbon side of it.
Brilliant, thanks, Roshni. Anna Maria, can you share the opportunities that arise from shifting to low carbon?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, increased property value, buildings with lower carbon footprints often have higher market values, cost savings, implementing energy efficient technologies and renewable energy sources can significantly reduce the utility costs. Access to incentive, governments and local authorities frequently offer tax incentives, subsidies, or rebates for energy efficient buildings and renewable energy installations. Attractive investment, competitive advantage. Real estate company can distinguish themselves in the competitive market. It enhances their brand reputation. Regulatory compliance, meeting and exceeding the current and anticipated regulation to carbon emissions can help avoid penalties, future-proof assets against regulatory changes, and position a company as a leader in compliance. Tenant satisfactions and retention, buildings that provide a healthier indoor environment and lower utility costs are more attractive to tenants, can lead to higher occupancy rates, longer lease terms, and reduced turnover. Resilience to market shifts, innovation and partnerships. Developing a low carbon solution can lead to collaboration with technology providers and other innovators. Exploring new business model. The transition to low carbon real estate opens new opportunities for innovative business models such as energy as a service, where energy savings are sold as a service, or incorporating green leases to share the costs and benefits of sustainability upgrades between owners and tenants. And ultimately making an impact, reducing the emissions by actively reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Real estate stakeholders contribute significantly to combating the climate change, which can enhance their social license to operate and foster community goodwill.
Yeah, ultimately, it's just a good business decision. So, Emma, I'll come straight onto you. The Holtara team and Apex as a group are going to be working very closely together this year to construct a dedicated strategy with reduction targets to hold us accountable and also provide milestones for how we get to where we need to be. Can you elaborate more on this and how we're going to strike the balance between business growth and reducing our footprint?
Yeah, of course, Lakshmi. And I think this is a natural evolution for the Apex group to really to deepen, I guess, the focus that we have on environmental impact of the company overall. And we do this quite routinely with most of the companies that we work with. And I think the primary aim here is really to uncouple company growth from emission growth. And I think, as Roshni suggested, a focus on intensity as well as absolute values is a really important metric. But what we want to do is try and position every company for the shift to low carbon economy, and really integrating that concept into a business model early is important because it needs to form part of the long-term strategic planning of the company. And I think it's important that that's taken into consideration as that company makes certain decisions about how they grow, and some of the investments they need to make in order to support that growth. So we advise most companies now to set a target, even if they're sort of in a growth phase. That target should be tailored to the company's business model. And I think there are a variety of targets that we work with and that the industry now has sort of come to accept, but the most important of which is the Science-Based Target Initiative. And here, I think we make sure that our companies at least set a Scope 1 and 2 emission target, given that they are the emissions that are directly impacted by that company's operational footprint. And so I think as a starting point, we'd start with Scope 1 and 2. And then for our more mature company clients, we also look at sort of Scope 3 emissions and consider which of the SBTI approaches best suits their needs.
Perfect. Emma, I'm going to stick with you actually and kind of shift to a technology focus. Obviously, as an organisation, we kind of create an entire business to catalyse change in the financial markets, and Holtara, as a subsidiary, has technology that supports our clients in, as you mentioned, collecting, verifying, reporting data in line with the needs of their various stakeholders. Can you share your insights from a technology platform perspective on what Holtara can offer clients?
Yeah, of course. And this is a pretty meaningful part of the Holtara offering, of course. And I think our ambition is that for all of the clients that we work with, we assess both what they need from an advisory or a consultancy standpoint, but of course also from a digital and a reporting platform standpoint. And Holtara have been in the business of offering ESG services for over a decade in total. And there's been a real evolution in that time, from Word documents and emails to Excel models, and now, of course, to platforms. And there aren't too many investors out there that aren't either considering a platform to leverage in order to streamline the collection of that data, or they potentially already have one in place. And that really is becoming more and more critical. We talked a lot about the proliferation of regulatory standards, of industry frameworks, and that all amounts to a huge amount of data being required from underlying companies and asset operators, as Anna Maria suggested. And having a platform in place means that clients can really move from sort of a point-in-time assessment and a really complex, time-consuming annual process to one where information can be gathered all throughout the year, sort of at relevant intervals. And then I guess the additional evolution of that platform, which we hear a lot about at the moment, is really the role of AI in helping to make that process more efficient, to kind of really streamline even further the data collection process across a various number of internal and external sources.
Great, amazing. Roshni, how about you? How's technology enhanced your ESG efforts?
I think what Emma speaks about is very closely resonates with BGF's experience. I mean, because we have such a large portfolio and we're very careful about the consistency of the data that we are providing back to the companies. That's why a tech platform plays that gap solver when it comes to how can you be robust, but at the same time know what you want to be tracking and track it in a way which is time valuable, right? Most investors, much like BGF, will have very, I would say, ambitious ESG teams, right? So you've got individuals, and technology plays that really critical support system in terms of how you focus in your attention on key trends. I mean, just like technology has been used on financial analysis side as well, on the ESG side as well, we need to be able to really spot the key trends across different areas, different sectors, different segments. And without tech, I really don't see how that's going to be possible. The other side of technology is that most businesses will be digital natives or getting into the digital native space. If you think about the SME and the growth stage, they are going through that journey. And unless ESG is part of that tech journey, I think it's a real opportunity lost, because if every other information is being used through a tech platform and ESG isn't, then you basically are missing a trick over there. What I particularly like is the fact that recognizing that technology is very useful, AI is very useful, but at the same time, you still need people-led insights. That's where you need to have individuals who have worked in the industry, understand specific sectors and segments to really make sense of what is the information telling us and where do we take technology further. Information for information's sake is not going to help us. And that's where we've appreciated the support we've gotten from Holtara in terms of, if you do a diligence, what is the key risk that a real estate business has versus an agriculture business? That's the insight that is a combination of tech plus people insights as well. So I do think that as we grow and as the industry grows, there will always be a space to combine the two. And the more that tech can reduce the time spent on the busyness of the data and the collection and the verification, and be more towards how do you enable better thinking and strategic decision making, the more impactful ESG as an area will become from a value add perspective.
Roshni, I love what you said there, and I think maybe just to build, I think the ambition, I think, for every investor is really to move beyond data collection into insights and action. And we spend, as an industry, an extraordinary amount of time collecting data. And that still really outweighs the effort and the time available to take insight from that data and to really drive change and to make impactful decisions. And to the extent we can streamline and automate that data collection as much as possible, so that investors can kind of get back to what we'd love them to be doing, which is interpreting and driving change, the better. And I think digital platforms and those data platforms have a really important role in that.
Brilliant, thanks, Emma. Anna Maria, what about you from the real estate angle?
The data collection and analysis has already been mentioned. So it's one of the most important aspects of enhancing the ESG efforts. And that leads us to also being able to do automated reporting and compliance. For automation and artificial intelligence, we can streamline the creation of compliance and ESG reports. This not only reduces the labor involved, but it also improves the accuracy and speed of our disclosure, making it easier to meet regulatory requirements and the stakeholders' expectations. Energy efficiency, it's another aspect. Smart building technologies, including IoT sensors and automated management system, allow for real-time monitoring and control of building operation. This helps in significantly reducing energy consumption and minimizing the carbon footprint. Sustainable resource management platforms can assist in sourcing and management of sustainable materials, making it easier to implement green building practices. Building certificates can be automated, such as the LEED, BREEAM, by automatically tracking and managing the required data and processes. Tenant engagement and social responsibility. Digital platforms can enhance communication with tenants, providing them with easy ways to engage in sustainability initiatives, report issues, or suggest improvements. And governance and transparency. Advanced software solutions enhance the governance by improving the transparency of our operations. These tools help in managing risk, ensuring compliance, fostering a culture of ethical behavior, or accountability across the organization.
Great, thanks, Anna Maria. We're just coming up to our last question, but before I ask it and pass on to the panel, I just want to remind everyone, if you do have any questions for the panel, please do send them in. We've got some time at the end to answer anything you'd like to ask us. But yes, going into our last question, we launched our sustainability report on Earth Day, which was on Monday, and it served as an important checkpoint for us, not just to reflect on the journey that we've been on, but also to look to the future and think about what comes next from a sustainability perspective. And for us, it's particularly important to remember that change can't and shouldn't happen overnight, and that in the interest of transparency and accountability, there needs to be a journey with incremental milestones to make it key to success. Emma, can you share how the Holtara team will be working with the wider Apex Group in 2024 to meet its goals?
Yeah, of course. And I think we touched on this a little bit, but I think, Apex Group has done a huge amount of work focusing really on social objectives in the last couple of years with some really world-class initiatives. We have the Women's Accelerator Program, which is, really, we have data now to demonstrate the impact that program is having. And so we're continuing, obviously, to expand the coverage of that program as well. But I think with Holtara, we're now focusing more on the environmental impact of the group. And as I mentioned, I think we're really focused now on scope 1, 2, and also 3 carbon measurements. So really starting to engage the suppliers of Apex and consider a broader range of scope 3 inputs. We'll be setting an SBTI target for the group overall, and also a net zero target. And then, of course, working with stakeholders from across the group to put milestones in place for reductions year on year. So it'll be, quite a challenging piece of work considering the geographic reach of Apex. But I think it's one which I know there's a huge amount of support for and sponsorship for, and it's something that we'll kick off quite imminently. And the other big priority, and I mentioned this as well a little bit before, but the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, is also a regulation in Europe, which Apex is partly in scope for. So there we're working very closely with the group's compliance and finance teams to kick off that piece of work. And this is undoubtedly, I think, one of the most significant and complex regulations that we've seen focused on sustainability globally, actually, let alone just in Europe. And we're really advising companies to get organised and to get started in preparation for CSRD. And to that extent, we've done trainings with the group and the stakeholders across Apex Group. We're also conducting a double materiality assessment, and that's really a fancy word for how we consider both the financial and the impact elements of sustainability which are relevant to the group. And then importantly, we also conduct a gap analysis routinely with our corporate clients to think about how do we already put the processes or the operational procedures in place so that when the time comes to start reporting on that regulation, we have the data available. And so that piece of work is something that we'll also really be putting some effort behind in 2024.
Great, thanks, Emma. Roshni, how about you? What's your focus for 2024?
So our focus is sort of build on some of the pieces that Emma said, which is around getting people to start owning and leading a lot of the directions which comes with ESG. So more specifically, we think about our focus areas as what do we do as a business, right? We are a people-based business with investors and infrastructure teams sitting across UK and Ireland. So how do we engage them in thinking about what makes BGF more responsible, and how do we leverage our own work with the BGF Foundation to be more meaningful? And then the second piece is what do we do with the portfolio? So one of the things that we always bring our focus back to is our annual ESG reporting. So we get, with the help of the Holtara platform, we receive sort of an aggregated score for all the reporting companies. So we saw quite a significant jump between 2022 and 2023, and we want to keep the average score of the portfolio increasing by around 10% each year. So that remains a key focus around how do we get the data side better and more practically impacted by the companies themselves. The other big piece for us is the fact that we became B Corp certified in December of last year. So with B Corp certifications, obviously comes a number of responsibilities, mostly in terms of, I think, is how do you breathe and live the ethos of becoming a responsible business, as well as how do you take your senior leadership team, your individuals, through the responsibility of how they are supposed to shift their day-to-day practices. So under the B Corp framework, we are continuing to think about how do we embed the people change more and more and bring in some of the elements which are quite critical to the certifications.
Great, thanks, Roshni. Anne Maria, last but not least, what's your focus for this year?
So from a technology angle, we are focusing on AI technologies to enhance the digitization of building data. And this effort involves several key objectives, such as comprehensive data collection, integration of platforms, advanced analytics, or enhancing reporting and accreditation processes. We are looking at the generative technology as an example, where AI and machine learning can automate the generation of compliance and ESG reporting documents, making it easier for companies to meet disclosure requirements without extensive manual effort. These technologies can analyze patterns and prediction that guide strategy adjustments in real time. So we've developed our first POC for generative AI for TCFD disclosure. So we took into consideration the data from TCFD, the public data from TCFD in terms of instruction, together with the client data, and we are using generative technology to automate parts of these disclosures, reducing the time for our user to create these disclosures. We are looking at AI-driven chatbots for real-time interaction. So we have developed chatbots using generative AI to provide immediate responses to stakeholders in inquiries, automatic certification, and benchmarking tools.
Great, thanks, Anna Maria, brilliant. We haven't had any questions coming in, so thank you all so much for your time. We'd love to hear from the audience, so if you do have a question for any of our panelists, please drop it in the comments and we can come back to you after the session. But thanks very much again, everyone. This has been a really great session and I hope everyone's found it useful. Thanks.
Thanks, Lakshmi. Thanks, Anna Maria and Emma.
Thank you.